Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's X Space. I'm Nusra Wali, Head of New Media here at the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC. Thank you for joining us. The landscape of the Nigerian power sector is changing rapidly. As of today, 16 states have fully transitioned to state electricity regulation. This includes Enugu, Ekiti, Ondo, and Imo, Oyo, Edo, Kogi, and Lagos, Ogun, Niger, Plateau, and Abia, as well as Nasara, Anambra, Bayelsa, and Gombe. Today, we're going to look at how this decentralization came about, and most importantly, what it means for you, the electricity consumer. We'll also be sharing a directory of state electricity regulatory commissions, or SERCs, later in the space, so stay tuned for that. I'm joined this morning by a fantastic panel of my colleagues to break this down. So let's start with a round of introduction.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kabir Adamu Garkwa. I'm a lawyer, a regulator in the Legal Licensing and Compliance Division of NERC. I'm particularly pleased to be with you to share our thoughts on this platform.
Thank you, Kabir.
Good morning, listeners. My name is Atite Begon. I am with the Stakeholder Management Division and particularly the Customer Complaints Unit. You're all welcome.
Thank you, Esther.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela Kubwe. I work with the Stakeholders Management Division and the next stakeholder unit of the division, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Pamela.
Good morning, listeners. I'm Ibrahim Yusuf with the Corporate Communication Department of the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. So today we're going to connect all the dots. We're going to start with the legal foundation, the new consumer complaints process, what FoNER is, and its role in this new multi-tier electricity market. And finally, we'll show you how to contact your SERC. Kabir, let's start with you on the legal foundation. What exactly enables states to step in and take over regulation in their states? And what process do they have to do to complete the transition?
Okay, thank you so much for this background. And I think it is really important to start by saying that we all know that before 2023, that is the current Electricity Act that governs the institutional and legal framework of the Nigerian electricity supply industry. We had the Electric Power Sector Reform Act in 2005. This EPSRA, or the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, established NERC as the independent regulator of the Nigerian power supply industry, empowering NEC to regulate the technical and commercial aspect of NEC. So this was established under the Electric Power Sector Reform Act during the administration of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Now, under EPSRA, NEC was the only regulator of the NEC. Anywhere you go, any market, it was just NERC, regulating supply, generation, distribution, transmission, both at federal and state level. It was only NRC. This was partly as a result of the constitutional limitation, which restricts the states from engaging in electricity operations or regulation in areas that are covered by the national grid. That is what was in the constitution before the amendment. Sorry. So in March 2023, the former president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, assented to the constitutional alteration bill in March. That singular act now removed that expression of areas covered by the national grid. Now, by that, it means that any state can generate or distribute power even in areas that are covered by the national grid. But we are going to speak about some of the nuanced interpretations or application of this broad expression as it is in the Constitution. So as we said, so after the amendment, the constitutional amendment, now we have like two separate markets, the state market and the federal market. But the constitutional amendment does not usually contain detailed provisions and procedure for transfer or for even operational application of the provision of the law. So what happened after the constitutional amendment? President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, one of the first acts that he did or he performed when he assumed office in June 2023 was to sign the amendment of or to sign a new electricity act, which is called the Electricity Act 2023. This Electricity Act did not just amend the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, but rather it repealed it in its entirety. We have now a new Electricity Act signed into law in 2023 as one of the first and consequential piece of legislation signed by Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to align the provision of the Constitution with the enabling law. So, and what one of the key things changes that you find in the Electricity Act is the detailed provision on decentralization, states' participation in the electricity market. So we have two markets. We have the federal electricity market, which is being governed by the by the Electricity Act, and the regulator is NERC. And then we have the states markets that are being governed by the states laws, or that states that have their own laws. These state markets are going to be governed because some states have already started implementing the provisions of the Constitution and the Electricity Act, while some states are still coming on board. Now, the question that we just asked is, what are the procedures? What are the legal procedures for states to start operating their own electricity market? This is very clear from the provision of the Electricity Act. The first thing that a state is required to do is to pass a law. You cannot do anything without a legal framework. A law will say that you cannot put something on nothing. So the first thing that is a state is to pass an appropriate legal framework, a law that establishes the regulator and the powers of the regulator of that state. That's the first thing a state is required to do. After that, then the state will be required to establish a regulator, because this is a very specialized area that requires an institutional lead by a regulator who is going to implement the provision of that law that is passed by the State House of Assembly. So, number one, you need you need to have a state law. Then, number two, you need to have the state regulator who is going to be responsible for implementing and establishing the electricity market in that state. And then there will be a notification, because the NERC is the custodian of all data in the Nigerian power supply industry, both operational operational and regulatory data in that particular state. So it is important to use. It is a statutory requirement for you to send a notification to NERC that you have complied with the requirement of Section 230 of the Electricity Act by establishing a legal framework, that is the law and the regulatory institution in that particular state. Then number two, you send a notification to the distribution company that is operating in your own area. So that disco that is in that area must be notified of the development. And then last but not the least, you send notification to National Council on Privatization through their secretariat, that is BPE. You know, BPE has still 40% shares in the distribution companies that we have today. So when that is done, NERC will now issue a transfer order. This transfer order will now detail the responsibilities of the key players, what NEC is required to do during the transitional period, what the distribution company is required to do during the transitional period, and so on and so on. So this order is going to run for 6 months. And after that 6 months, the states now will start cooperating and will start issuing all the necessary regulatory approvals, licenses, and so on and so on. But they will only be limited to intra-state operations and regulation. That is what is very clear. We have two markets. The state market is only in-state operation, that is operating within the boundary of state, and their operations are non-grid based operation. They will not touch on the national grid system, as if they will do that, then they will require the approval or the consent of the wholesale markets regulator, that is NERC. So these are some of the requirements that a state is required to comply with before they start their own electricity market. Let me just mention them to make them a little bit more structured in simpler term. Number one, the state is required to pass a law. Number two, a state is required to have a regulator. Number three, a state is required to send a notification to NERC, notification to BPE, and notification to the distribution company. And then last but not the least, NERC will now issue a transfer order.
Thank you, Kabir. That background is incredibly helpful. Thank you very much. Now that we have the legal process covered, let's talk about the direct impact on consumers. Atisir, over to you. If someone is listening right now from one of these transition states, how exactly has their complaints process changed?
Thank you, Nusra, for that question. So before I get into how the process has changed, I would like to just give a brief background on what the process used to be. So NEC as the regulator, as the overall regulator, was responsible for ensuring resolution of complaints. And so NEC set in place a three-tier redress mechanism, which started at the customer complaints unit. When customers had complaints, they had to approach the customer complaints unit of their distribution companies. And if the complaints were not resolved or were not satisfactorily resolved, they had to escalate them to the forum offices, which were also set up by NEC in 30 states at the time. Additionally, where those complaints were resolved at the forum, but customers were not satisfied, or even the DISCO was not satisfied with the resolution, they had to approach the commission, which was the third tier in that process. They had to take the complaint to the commission, ask an appeal, and the commission would sit over that appeal and give a decision, which will now be binding on all parties at the time. However, with the transitioning of some states, that process has changed. NEC is no longer the overall or the final arbiter, the final decision maker in complaint resolutions for those states. So I'm going to use Enugu State as an example. For Enugu State, for instance, a customer who has a complaint within Enugu State right now, because Enugu State has fully transitioned, that customer will have to approach the DISCO in the state, which is also referred to as the subco. The customer will approach the subco with their complaint, and it is expected that this complaint will be resolved. So for Enugu State, they kind of adopted some of our processes. So they also have a 15-day period within which that complaint is supposed to be resolved. And if it is not resolved within that timeline, the customer is going to escalate it to the state regulator, which is Enugu State Regulator. So for Enugu State, that's the process that they have adopted. So what I'm trying to say, back to your question, is for customers within the states that have transitioned, when they have complaints, they approach the distribution companies within their states, the subcodes within their states that have been established already. Where those complaints are not resolved, they escalate them to the state regulators. So some states have set up their complaints redress mechanisms, some are yet to do so. However, if a customer has a complaint within the states, then they approach the subco with the complaint and then subsequently approach the state regulator with the complaint if it is not resolved. the addresses of the state regulators, the directories are going to be posted on the call so that customers have access to that information. So what has changed in that process is NERC is no longer in that process of resolution of complaints for states that have transitioned. The resolution of complaints now lies solely on the state regulators. If the subcodes fail, the state regulators decide what happens. It's now their responsibility. So NERC is no longer in the process for resolution of complaints within states that have transitioned already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ekasir. I'm really glad you clarified that because we actually get a lot of DMs from customers in transition states. So understanding this new escalation path is really crucial for us. So let me reiterate that for everyone listening. If you are in a transition state and you have an unresolved dispute with your DISCO, you no longer escalate to the NERC forum. You now escalate directly to your SERC. And just to clarify, as she was talking about, she mentioned subco, that means subsidiary company, and that's basically the name of DISCOs that are in states that have transitioned. So it's the same thing as a DISCO, but it's a subsidiary company. So, you know, just to clear the language so that for people that don't know what subco is, not to be confused. Okay, so with multiple regulators stepping in, a common concern we hear is whether this decentralization will create confusion. Pamela, can you walk us through FoNER, what it is and what role it plays in the power sector?
Okay, thank you, Nusra. Yeah, so FoNER, what is FoNER? FoNER is the Forum of Nigerian Electricity Regulators, and it's a body that has been recently inaugurated to foster coordination and collaboration between the two tiers of regulators. I mean, a lot has been said on the decentralization of the sector, where we now have the federal regulator and the state regulators. And it has become very necessary for collaboration to happen at this point. And on that note, FoNER was inaugurated on the 25th of March, 2026 with a charter signing ceremony. And 8 states signed up the charter, including and NERC as well, making it 9 parties at the time. Thereafter, we had 3 more states that came on board. So we have a total of 11 states actually, and then NERC making it 12. So essentially, FoNER is it seeks to create, a coordinated and efficient investor-friendly sector for Nigeria, and it seeks to promote cooperation, coordination, harmonization of policies, and knowledge exchange among the tiers of regulators, and overall just create a unified system for approaching electricity-related issues in Nigeria. And FoNER has FoNER seeks to also create a system where research and a lot of knowledge capacity building would happen in the sector. So you would find that states, because the decentralization has made it such that states are able to approach their problems that are peculiar to them, right? So in this instance, if a state has already dealt with an issue before, if a new state, experiences that, they're able to exchange and exchange knowledge and get some kind of experience from their peers. So it's a very laudable initiative, and we're looking forward to more states signing up, and yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, thank you for explaining that to us, Pamela. I think from what you said, having that collaborative forum helps states create customized solutions for themselves while still tapping into that experience that NERC and other SERCs have.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, as promised, it's time to share the SERC directory so you know exactly how to reach your SERC. Ibrahim, it's over to you.
All right, thank you, Nusra. As you mentioned, we get a lot of messages online from customers asking how to contact the state electricity regulatory commissions or SERCs. And to make things easy, we have created a centralized SERC directory on our website. It has everything you need to reach them, their websites, emails, phone numbers, office addresses, and social media handles. Since some states are still setting up and more will be transitioning soon, we will be updating this directory regularly to ensure it stays accurate. You can access it right now at nerc.gov.ng/resources/SERCS. We have also just shared it on all our social media platforms. Again, that link is nerc.gov.ng/resources/SERCS. Whether you're a customer, consumer, an investor, or market participant, please use these resources and share it with your network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibrahim. To everyone listening right now, Ibrahim has shared that the SERC Directory link on all our social media platforms. And as he said, we'll be updating it regularly as more and more states transition. So that brings us to the end of our program today. A massive thank you to Kabir, Atisir, Pamela, and Ibrahim for sharing your expertise. And to you, our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you now have a much better understanding of the transition to state electricity regulation and what it means for you. Remember, NERC is on X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Make sure to follow us across all our platforms at NERCNG. That's at NERCNG for future updates. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.